Welcome to the Sleepless Cinematic Podcast, where we explore our shared love for watching and discussing movies recorded in the late after-work hours, often in lieu of a good night's rest. I'm Julian.
I'm Emilio.
And I'm Madeline. The three of us are colleagues at a Midtown Manhattan music school. Yes, music is what brings us together, but movies are what keep us together talking at the end of the night. So we've decided to create some order to this ongoing trend and record these conversations, considering an overarching theme while we cycle through 5 distinct categorizable guidelines for engagement.
This podcast is an evolving thing, and changes and tweaks here and there are most likely going to happen. But while we do it, you, the listener, can count on the three of us doing what we've grown to love, foregoing sleep for a discussion about movies every other week.
And this week, apropos of 2023's movie awards season, we start our current cycle of movies related to unique Best Picture winners at the Oscars with a category we call View-nanimous, where we revisit a movie the three of us have all seen before and see if our initial opinions still stand, if they've changed, or if discussing the movie will make us see things we didn't see before. And to begin this cycle, what better movie to do it with than the Best Picture winner of 1991, The Silence of the Lambs.
A truly unique.
First horror film to ever win Best Picture.
Only
right?
one, as
Only
to this day.
Still to this day.
It's somewhat questionable whether it's like truly a horror film, but it definitely has horror elements.
There were definitely times in this rewatch when I think in the first half where I was like, is this a horror movie? And then there were parts in the second half where I was like, hell yeah, it's a horror movie because I was scared.
But we should say, before we get too deep into this, that this is not to be confused with the film Silence, which is the Martin Scorsese film where Andrew Garfield and Adam Driver are missionaries.
Not to be confused with The Silence of the Sea or Le Silence de la Mer, the 1949 directorial debut of Jean-Pierre Melville.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's make sure we don't get this movie confused with that one. I'd also let everybody know, this movie is not to be confused with the film Lions for Lambs, which is a 2007 film starring Robert Redford, Michael Pena, Meryl Streep, and oddly enough, Tom Cruise in a non-action role.
Yeah, I remember that movie.
Yeah,
I didn't
me too.
see it, but I remember the trailer for it. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah.
We also shouldn't get it confused with The Science of Sleep, which is the 2006 Michel Gondry film starring Gael Garcia Bernal and Charlotte Gainsbourg. And it very well could be confused with The Silence of the Lambs because the title of The Silence of the Lambs comes from the reference that Clarice Starling hears screams of lambs in her sleep.
Yeah.
So got to watch out for that. Don't want to confuse this movie with any of those.
And of course, we don't want it confused either with The Sound of Silence. Simon Garfunkel song.
Yeah, definitely. This is a unique thing, and in fact, it came from a book, right? Am I remembering this correct?
You mean The Silence of the Lambs?
Yes. That one.
None of the other ones. Well, maybe. I don't know.
But yeah, so The Silence of the Lambs. Now, actually, as a kind of a way to begin this cycle of episodes, one question I have for you both, and I have some answers myself, is, apropos of discussing the Academy Award for Best Picture, what are sometimes, because this is such an evolving thing over the many years that it has happened, what are some times that you think the Academy has just straight up gotten it right with the Best Picture winner?
That is, that's kind of a hard one.
I have some answers I can offer.
Sure. I mean, I think as of late, I think one that felt very deserving in the moment that was kind of odd was Parasite.
Agreed.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that movie was just brilliant on so many levels, and definitely felt like one of those movies that when you watched it, you immediately thought, okay, foreign film, okay, sort of convoluted, not really straightforward in its plot or kind of how the narrative unfolds. And so you thought it might just sort of be this quirky film that was getting good attention. But when it won, I think it's very deserving. So that's one that comes to mind.
Yeah, I definitely, though, to be entirely fair to Parasite, I went into that with extremely high expectations. I think just from being pretty familiar with Bong Joon-ho prior to that movie. So, I mean, it was incredibly deserving, but I always had high hopes for it, I think. But I don't have high hopes, or it didn't at the time, for the Academy.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, particularly, I think this was around, I guess it was the following year when Minari was like, I think it was the Golden Globes, actually, where Minari was nominated for foreign feature, even though it's a movie that takes place in America. So I don't necessarily have the highest hopes for the people voting in the awards for the Globes and the BAFTAs and the Oscars. But I do think Parasite, was the time when they got it right.
I'm looking back a little bit, and there's some movies in the 50s that I would definitely point to and say, I really think that these movies have stood the test of time, and maybe even a little bit more so than some of their contemporaries.
That's true.
I'm looking at 1950, and I would, even though Sunset Boulevard and was up there and is definitely a heavyweight contender, I think, in the Best Picture nominee category, I really do think All About Eve is the clear winner on that one. That movie is bananas, and I think maybe even in some ways more influential, when it comes to dialogue and when it comes to sort of this complicated protagonist, complicated antagonist storyline. I think All About Eve is incredible. I would also point to 1955's winner, Marty, which I absolutely love. Marty also, I think, is on record for being the shortest film to win Best Picture. I think it clocks in just under an hour and a half. I am a huge Marty stan. The teleplay by Paddy Chayefsky, and also the feature film that instead stars Ernest Borgnine, but was also directed by Delbert Mann, who was the director of the teleplay. I think both of them are absolutely phenomenal, and just, I mean, that play and that script taps into something really primal about human connection. And so I'm just looking at the 50s, and those are the two that jump out to me: All About Eve and Marty.
Interesting, and I actually haven't seen either of those. And then, to point to some more recent examples, I mean, honestly, we'll get more into this later, but I think The Silence of the Lambs is the time when the Academy got it right. I think also No Country for Old Men, I really agree with that one, because, I mean, it was, a bit of a legacy award for the Coen brothers by that time, but I think if they're going to give it to them for any movie, that felt like the right one.
I mean, I got to say, though, 2007 was an absolute
solid year
of a year.
There Will Be Blood.
I was going to say, man,
Judo.
I mean, There Will Be Blood.
Michael Clayton.
I love Michael Clayton.
Yeah.
That movie rips. I mean, just looking right before 2007, all three of us are literally, scrolling away frantically on laptops right now.
Yeah.
I think trying to come up with answers for this. But like looking before even 2007, the years that directly precede it, I think there are some definite misses.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
maybe some that we're going to come back to.
And on either side, I think, of 2007. Like, I'd say the following year also is maybe miss, or at least controversial when.
Slumdog Millionaire.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, when you look at the other
I mean, maybe
nominees,
that was 2007 was such a strong year that like you get to 8 and you're like,
yeah, it feels a little bit like a letdown.
That happens though. It's not the only time it's happened in history where there's like one year where they just nail it, and the other year you're like, really?
I mean, I think that we've seen a little bit of that in recent years, for sure.
With Green Book winning the year before Parasite.
Yeah. I would say too, if I'm bouncing around a little bit more, I think another movie that is totally deserving of Best Picture winner is Amadeus. We talked a little bit.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about Milos Forman. In our One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest episode. I think I made it known in that episode that Amadeus is my favorite of his films. That movie is also, I think, one that if you look at the other films that it's up against, definitely stands out, I think, in a really big way. And then I would say another surprising one in here that I think when you look at it, you go, interesting, but I think culturally is an extremely important film, is 1979's Kramer versus Kramer.
Never seen it
Another film that is, I think, with a few details maybe in the execution of the story, I think really timeless film about the relationship of a father and a son, about the relationship between a husband and a wife, and the fragile bonds of marriage. And I think that is a really fantastic film. And just looking at the other films that came out around that time, I think that's the clear winner for sure. I think the Academy got it right in 1979, or I guess in 1980 when they awarded it.
I'd agree, although I do really love All That Jazz. That's a really, really excellent film in my opinion.
I know there are a lot of All That Jazz.
Yeah. Isn't Apocalypse
fans.
Now nominated that year
Have
too?
you seen Kramer versus Kramer?
I've not seen it all the way through. I've only seen parts of it. So it's like I assume from my familiarity with that movie, I assume it is the deserving winner. But I also do love All That Jazz as a film, and I think is probably my favorite Bob Fosse. So if one of his was going to win, that would be my choice.
I could totally see that.
Yeah.
Having seen both of those movies, I totally understand that. And yeah, I mean, we can definitely agree to disagree if we want, and I think they're both really strong films.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And then one really recent example that I think is the Academy getting it right, as I've told to you both before, but not in this episode, Everything Everywhere All at Once.
I legitimately thought that maybe I could like cue everybody and we would just say it together because I knew that you were going to say that.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like I'm going to go there. I think not only is that a deserving Best Picture winner, I think it's one of the best movies ever made. Just full stop.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know I'm the one who's not jumping on this bandwagon quite yet, and that's fine. You know, I am completely okay with that.
Yeah,
that stance.
Yeah, I mean, at the time we're recording this, that is the most recent Best Picture winner.
Yeah.
I think that year, last year for us, was a really, really solid year
it
of
certainly
movies.
Was.
Sure,
and
totally.
I loved a lot of movies from last year, and I loved Banshees, I loved Tar. Like either of those, I think would have been also deserving. I think probably my pick, other than Everything Everywhere All at Once, would have been Tar.
Probably for me too.
Yeah, I think either of those would have been very deserving.
Yeah.
I think this is also a conversation that we'll most likely continue to have in future bonus content episodes. But yeah, we'll definitely get into that a little bit more. And then I think also just in the coming weeks as we continue to talk more about Oscar films.
Yeah.
But this is I don't know. It's an interesting marker. You know, I think for all of the name brand recognition that the Oscars have, sometimes I don't give it too much weight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really, sometimes I'm just like, okay, cool. A group of people have decided to crown such and such film or such and such performance or give it, these particular accolades. And I just kind of keep it moving. So
yeah, totally. I think that my fascination with awards season is less about putting any weight on the opinions of these particular people that are voting, and more about just like talking with other people about the love of movies. And I think like films that maybe did not have a super successful first run at the box office, like kind of getting a second chance, like getting a re-release and getting talked about more. And perhaps like people unlike ourselves who, like the three of us, are constantly talking about movies and looking at what's coming out and potentially seeing new releases. I think award season is a time when people who like movies but maybe don't love them to the extent that we do, like kind of get excited about them.
Right. Yeah. The more casual film goer can ramp up their excitement.
Yeah. I think, award season, whatever thoughts or feelings you have about the Oscars or any other ceremony, and how subjective it all is, I think it's an interesting litmus test for the state of the film industry. And, sometimes if something wins that's a huge upset, it's interesting to ask why it's an upset. But if something wins that just feels like exactly the right thing, that's also really interesting.
I would ask this. So I think in hindsight, Silence of the Lambs feels like a very deserving winner, even though it does feel very unique. We did discuss that it is a horror film, or would fall, I think, pretty cleanly in a horror genre. But that's hindsight talking. I feel like at the time it was kind of a surprise. I feel like I remember reading a little bit about the actual awards night, and I think Warren Beatty, who was up, or whose film Bugsy, I think, was up for a lot of the similar awards that Silence of the Lambs was up for. I think he notably was frazzled by the sweep that was happening. And I think maybe that wasn't necessarily just Warren Beatty's well-publicized hubris. I think it was actually maybe a reflection of the general public at large that a movie this... I would say pretty unusual to be awarded, or to be given these types of awards.
Yeah.
For this movie to have to make such a splash at the Oscars.
What do you think would have been at the time the more expected win?
I was listening to the episode of the Blank Check podcast about The Silence of the Lambs, and they were saying there that the more conventional win among the movies nominated that year would have been for JFK.
I would say so too.
Yeah.
It also feels a little bit, well, actually, Oliver Stone did win in 1986.
But yeah,
So maybe he had a little bit of that working against him.
It's true.
The other super interesting thing too about, we're talking about unusual or unique Oscar winners. There was a chance for a truly unique Oscar winner to happen, which was the Disney's animated Beauty and the Beast was one of the 5 nominated films. I'm not going to go looking for it, but I have to imagine that that's maybe one of the only times that that's happened.
Yeah,
especially when there were only 5 nominees. So prior to 2009.
Yeah, I mean, and I think to my memory, an animated film has never won Best Picture and has only been nominated a handful of times.
Sure.
So that certainly would have been, extremely out of left field.
Yeah. While we're still on the topic of the Best Picture Academy Award specifically, so of course, even though the optics of that picture itself might go towards the director or the actors, the award itself is given to the producers of that film.
Right.
And the producers of The Silence of the Lambs were Edward Saxon, Kenneth Utt, and Ron Bozeman, at least one, possibly 2 of whom were regular collaborators with Jonathan Demme, who directed The Silence of the Lambs. And the fun story that I have to tell about that is that of those 3 producers, I have been in the same room as 2 of them.
Okay.
The story being that after Jonathan Demme passed away in 2017, that over at BAM in Brooklyn, they did a series, a tribute series to him, where they showed all of his films. And there was one screening that they had, a 35 millimeter screening of Something Wild, which is 2 movies before The Silence of the Lambs, where they had a Q&A with one of the producers, Edward Saxon, right afterward, which is moderated by a guy you might know about named Paul Thomas Anderson.
Right.
Never heard of him.
He loves Jonathan Demme.
He does, yeah.
He's been on record saying that many times.
And then there was a moment during that Q&A where Edward Saxon asked, let me just ask, is Ron Bozeman here? And then a hand shot up from inside the crowd.
I can sense him. He's somewhere in this room.
Yeah. And so that was a special moment. I did not know going in how much talent was going to be in that one room. But also, interestingly, for a movie with, or for a screening in particular that had those names in it, it was well attended. I don't think it was sold out. Like, Paul Thomas Anderson was there, and it wasn't sold out. Like, that still kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, in Brooklyn, that's that you'd think
BAM.
that people would show up and show out.
It was on a Friday, too. Yeah, you would think, but I feel very lucky to have been there. The connection, apart from Jonathan Demme himself, or in addition to Jonathan Demme himself, is that in that Q&A, actually, I believe that Paul Thomas Anderson identified Something Wild as the movie that begins Jonathan Demme's obsession with close-ups.
Oh,
yeah.
That's one of the details that I definitely want to talk about.
Yeah,
certainly.
This movie is great with those close-ups.
Yeah. And when we say this movie, we are not referring to any of the previous ones we talked about, but the actual Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
And actually, may I share a story about how I was introduced to this movie?
Share
Please.
away.
Yeah.
So this movie, it's almost universally agreed to be a great movie, but for me, if you asked me to name an all-time top 10 favorite movies, this would certainly be on it. And this was a very formative movie for me in my cinephile life. And it was not the first one. I mean, like, as a small child, being introduced to Star Wars just captivated my imagination. Then, as a budding musician, This Is Spinal Tap was exactly the right blend of humor and intrigue that I needed at that time. As a teenager learning to balance my curiosity with a healthy amount of skepticism, The Big Lebowski was the movie that clicked. And then as a student wanting to understand what makes great art. In college was on the horizon for me at the time. The Silence of the Lambs, this was the movie that really hit at that time. This was the first movie I really felt like I studied properly. And I was introduced to it in a film class in high school. It was just a semester-long elective, so it was kind of on the margins of the curriculum at the school, but it was still, in what was a very dense time for me academically, that this was one of the things I really got sucked into. And in that course, there were a few movies we watched. It was only like five full features, that is. Those 5 being Memento, Psycho, The Silence of the Lambs, Terminator 2, and the 5th one we could choose from a few options, and I chose In the Heat of the Night. And they were all great movies, all affected me in some way, but The Silence of the Lambs was the one I really got sucked into. And I don't think I could articulate why at the time. I could venture to do it now. I think it was just, the acting in it, the imagery, the chemistry between Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins, the general intrigue of the subject matter. Something about that movie just really clicked for me. And so, like, when I say this is the first movie that I studied, this is also the first time, and actually the only time to date, that I was introduced to a prominent film writer as required reading for the course, and that writer was Sid Field. And there were some points.
Very famous. He wrote like the famous screenwriting book, right?
Yeah, and I think this might have been from that, with Ted Talley's screenplay as something that was being broken down. And I will mention a few anecdotes that I can still remember from that as this conversation proceeds. But yeah, this was a life-changing film for me. And yeah, just brief shout out to my high school film teacher, Miss Reed, who, if there's any way that this reaches you, you're a life changer. Thank you.
Wonderful. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
Anytime a movie has impacted somebody on a really profound level and kind of makes them see the world a little differently.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's cool. That's
Yeah.
really cool. It gives me a little bit of a buzz.
I should mention off of that comment too that within the year after I was first exposed to the movie, I read the book The Silence of the Lambs too. And I'll mention a few anecdotes from that, what I can remember of it. But yeah, it's a fascinating book to read too, and it really confirmed to me that, if you're working with great subject matter, that the experience of seeing a movie before you read a book or the other way around, one does not take away from the other.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I wrestle with that as well.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I can't say I've read so many books that I can say I've truly contended with that issue many times, but I've certainly thought about that a number of times.
Yeah, I'd say I often find myself in the situation of wanting to see a movie and kind of putting it off because I want to read the book first. I think I mentioned you guys recently, like Eileen is out right now, and I have read other books by this author that I've loved, and I've not gotten to Eileen, and so I'm like, well, I have to read the book first because I know that I'm going to enjoy the book. So I think that's it for me, is I'm not going to automatically like read any book in preparation for a movie that's based off of a book. But if there's a book that I am confident that I'm going to really enjoy and want to be able to savor and be like surprised by things that are happening, then I'd rather read the book first.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember because The Silence of the Lambs is a movie that has left a really strong footprint on not just, I think, the film loving community, but I think just sort of pop culture at large.
Definitely.
I mean, the character of Hannibal Lecter as a villain, I think, can pretty unanimously be agreed upon as being, if not the one of the most terrifying antagonists ever committed to screen.
Yeah, I mean, he's number one on AFI's list
of
top 100 villains.
Okay, there we go.
And I think that list was created before Heath Ledger's Joker, but so he'd probably be high up there, but probably still number 2 to Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah. Oh, you think he'd be that high?
Probably.
I think he'd be quite up there, like top 10 easily.
I would say I could see top 10. I don't know about maybe 2, but
I mean, I wouldn't rule it out.
I would certainly put the Joker above Nurse Ratched.
Oh, absolutely.
Who is number 5 on that list?
Good God.
Number 5 after Hannibal Lecter, Norman Bates, Darth Vader, and the Wicked Witch of the West.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wait, are you serious?
It's a good
I am serious.
Okay.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to understand why I'm perplexed in this moment, make sure to listen to our conversation about
episode.
Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
So let's say that the Joker at the very least has to be number 5 and bump Ratchet down to 6.
At the very, very least, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madeline. I'm trying to remember, though, the first time that I can remember seeing this film, and I don't have a good answer, actually. I feel like this is a movie that I might have first seen in pieces, and then eventually saw the entire film. I know that by the time I was in maybe 16 or 17, by that time I had rented this film from the video store I was working at, and finally was like, okay, let me watch this. And I remember thinking it was incredible when I first saw it. And you know what? Okay, upon revisiting it too, I gotta say, I think this movie, the shock of what you see on screen holds up tremendously well. And I've seen some crazy stuff. I think we all have.
Yeah.
But that was one of my big takeaways. I mean, I remember when upon first seeing this movie, I felt that way too. I felt like I was seeing something very, very transgressive, and I still kind of feel that way.
I think part of the effect of how this happens is that the movie does not always show you. Occasionally you get moments where they're describing or just like giving you quick glimpses of something extremely gruesome, and you kind of have to fill it in with your mind.
Like
and
the autopsy, maybe?
The autopsy is one, but also towards the very, very beginning, right when Clarice is about to meet Hannibal for the first time, and she's shown the picture, of what he did to the nurse when, you know, he was kind of trying to plan his escape, I guess, and he like eats her tongue and takes out one of her eyes and dislocates her jaw, and they just show the Polaroid.
Right.
Or sorry, they
you,
don't.
The viewer, don't see it.
They don't show the Polaroid, is what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
So,
my laugh was very preemptive because it just reminded me of the scene in Inherent Vice when Doc
Absolutely.
Portello was exactly. So I'm just imagining Jodie Foster making the acting choice to do that, and how that probably wouldn't have worked.
I don't know.
I think. Okay.
I mean, it works in Inherent Vice for me. It's like maybe my favorite moment of that movie, but it maybe doesn't work tonally with this movie. But yeah, the fact that you don't see the Polaroid and it's only described to you, I think makes it so that when you do see gruesome things later, it hits harder.
I totally agree. I mean, I think a lot of what happens in the film too, like you said, it's not a film that feels like there are jump scares left and right, or that there is something particularly like grimy or gritty about it. It actually feels, I don't know, very like anodyne, almost sort of like procedural in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
You know, it starts at an FBI training facility essentially, and the further the movie continues, I think the more you kind of start to see, to the point you mentioned earlier. First half of the movie, questionable if it's horror, and then the second half you have many instances that bump it up.
Yeah, and I mean, I think when you look at the pantheon of great horror movies, it's interesting to me how a lot of the most highly lauded examples are things that really have minimal gore.
Sure.
And that can be other things like Halloween, or I just recently saw the Texas Chainsaw Massacre for the first time.
Finally
you got around
that.
to it.
Yeah, actually kind of in preparation for this movie, because Leatherface is partially based on Ed Gein, to my understanding.
Who
Buffalo Bill is based on,
exactly,
too.
yeah.
In part. But yeah, a lot of those, I mean, it's like classic slasher movies, among other things. Or you could say Psycho, too. That these are movies that they certainly have shock value, but they don't over-display it.
Totally.
Same thing with The Shining, I think.
Yeah, absolutely with The Shining. Part of what that speaks to is that these are movies that are very content focused.
Totally.
The scares are there, they do deliver on that front, but they don't do too much with it.
I also think gratuitous gore, it becomes more popular as time goes on.
Yeah, with like Saw and things like that.
It's interesting though, because there definitely was an era of gratuitous gore that precedes The Silence of the Lambs.
It's true.
But it was definitely geared more towards a slasher film that was kind of jumbled with like movies directed more towards younger audiences, teenagers in trouble, teenagers misbehaving, teenagers being punished, you know, and this movie is decidedly not a movie about or geared towards young people. Yes, there is a young person at the center of this film, but she's decidedly very grown up.
Yeah.
Is it Friday the 13th?
I'm thinking of Friday the 13th.
Yeah, which I actually haven't seen, but I could put the details together.
I mean, there's a slew of them, like Sleepaway Camp or like Silent Night, Deadly Night is another one. I mean, there's so many of them.
And in the process of preparing for this episode, I purchased and have been reading this book about the Silence of the Lambs from the BFI Film Classics series. It's written by author Ivan Tasker. And I mean, it was talking, among other things, about many of the aesthetics of the Silence of the Lambs and kind of how it subverts tropes of horror. There's definitely some acknowledgement of the tropes of Gothic horror in the Silence of the Lambs.
Sure.
What with like the exterior of the asylum in Baltimore where Hannibal Lecter is imprisoned.
Right.
Or like the the basement of said asylum.
Yeah, I remember thinking this is a very like stony walkway.
Yeah.
Like when she's entering, it does not feel modern at all.
Right.
No. You're
Yeah,
right.
and I mean another example being the interior of Buffalo Bill's house, that basement, really fitting kind of the tropes of Gothic horror. And I think that final sequence, or close to final sequence, in Buffalo Bill's basement is often cited as one of the horror qualifiers of the Silence of the Lambs. That's one of the moments where it's like really it confirms to you this is a horror movie.
I have a logistical question about his basement, which is, do you buy a house and then build the well inside of the basement, or do you find a well and build your house around it?
Good question.
Well, I believe part of the lore is that this house didn't belong to him, that there was like the shop owner, I think, of where he worked with Frederica Bimmel, had previously owned the house. I think it's implied that he killed her and took the house over.
Right. So
Yeah.
so he adds the well.
Maybe he was like...
Because why would she have a well in her basement?
Maybe he was...
Maybe she was up to no good.
Maybe she was up to no good. Maybe he was stalking her in some way.
Is it a functional well? Maybe she was just using it.
Yeah. Maybe she needed well water. You know, she had specific needs for that type of H2O.
Maybe that's what drew him to that house specifically. The well was already there, and he knew that. And he's like, that is a great place to trap somebody.
Sure.
Yeah. But that's often cited as like a good example of like Gothic horror tropes in The Silence of the Lambs. And it's notable for the contrast too that you see, and I am drawing again from that Ivan Tasker book in saying this, that, you know, right at the beginning of the movie, when you see the brutalist architecture of Quantico, that it's like, this is not what horror looks like.
Yeah, totally.
There's a lot of, you know, this kind of modernism depicted in the buildings that the film is set in, and, you know, other aspects related to that really, it very consciously goes against the tropes of horror. And this is kind of where the influence of the film is seen too, maybe a little less in the horror sphere, but more in the crime police procedural sphere.
Yeah.
Where television shows like The X-Files, CSI, Criminal Minds, all kind of draw from that visual palette as well. But yeah, so I mean, like in the visual sense, these details are among some that really set The Silence of the Lambs apart from the horror genre at large. I think what's interesting too, in considering the crime aspects of this movie and the police procedural stuff, I think this is a very unique take on a trope we see in some other great films, at least in the crime genre, films like Heat or The Departed or The Dark Knight, or television shows like The Wire. And that's the idea of there being this kind of symbiotic relationship between law enforcement and the world of crime, in that they are always against each other, but they kind of need each other for purpose too.
Yeah. You mentioned, you know, Heat, Michael Mann, who directed, and I believe wrote that film too. He famously adapted the other Thomas Harris novel, Red Dragon, into the film Manhunter about 5 years before Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
And that's another film, you know, that incorporates this idea of there being a police officer or police detective who Hannibal Lecter has had a rather difficult relationship with before. And and to your point, you know, there being sort of a connection there where the story relies on both of them rather equally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in that's also Crawford, right? Who Clarice works with very closely in this film. That's the same character. I mean, different actors, but same character, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, I think that speaks to the antagonism you sense between the two of them that seems to go beyond just an unconnected, I'm trying to solve a murder case and this guy won't cooperate. You can tell that there's a backstory with them that like isn't really explored fully.
Yeah, the Jack Crawford character is kind of interesting because he keeps a lot close to the vest. I think, for my taste, and look, I think this is a great movie, but sometimes there's some things about his character that feel very like kind of flat and wooden. Again, I don't know if that is necessarily just in how he's written. I think it's also a little bit in how he's acted. He's not, I think, the strong point of the film. I think he has to definitely be there in order for certain other elements and other kind of narrative strands to work. But he's not like my favorite character, I got to say.
Yeah, which is, I think, something that's interesting, which you guys may already know, is that, originally Gene Hackman was attached to this project to both direct it and play Crawford.
Do you think he would have been a better Jack Crawford?
I don't know. I mean, I actually don't know that I take any issue necessarily with Scott Glenn in this. I don't know that his performance is doing anything particularly exciting, but I don't know that it fell as flat for me as it did for you necessarily.
Yeah, I don't think it didn't fall flat for me, but I wonder a bit if Gene Hackman might have overdone that part. Because Gene Hackman's a great actor, but I mean, my main association with him is as Popeye Doyle in The French Connection, and that's a very amped up part.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny because I could see it going either way.
Interesting.
Like, I know that he was set to direct, and I know that there were some editorial decisions about Jack Crawford's relationship with Clarice Starling that may or may not have crossed an ethical line.
Yeah.
Maybe this is me taking it too far, but maybe Gene Hackman would have fought to keep that in. I don't know why. That he might have felt like there was something there that he could kind of explore a little bit more. And that's just like my gut speaking. It's not based on anything. I don't know the guy.
Do we know why Gene Hackman passed on this movie, though?
I think he said
the
content. Yeah.
Yeah, he was like disturbed by it.
Yeah. And just I think for his first outing as a director, I think he might have been looking for something a little safer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the subject matter, this script, this film as a whole is, I think, too much for a directorial debut.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan Demme was a seasoned director by the time that The Silence of the Lambs came to him. And, I mean, I think what a lot of people praise about his direction, and I certainly would too, is that he takes what could be on paper this sort of rote procedural story and really humanizes everyone in it. In large part due to his close-ups, but it's not just that. It's really that, you can tell that he's giving so much attention to every little aspect of every performance in this movie. He really, he's finding the heart in it. And, because we're talking about serial killers who eviscerate people's bodies, there might have, been the possibility of literally finding some heart there. But
yeah, I think just my point overall is just that I don't actually think that someone anyone, whether it be Hackman, who at the time, has been acting for many, many years, but would be diving into directing for the first time. I'm not confident that he would, have the same expertise as someone like Demme, who's accomplished at this point.
Sure.
Yeah. Do you both know who one of the other top candidates was to play Hannibal Lecter?
I have a whole list,
Yeah.
But I'm curious as to who jumped out from that list enough for you to bring it up.
Mr. SNL Celebrity Jeopardy, Sean Connery.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tell me, Clarice, what did Meg say to you?
I was going to say,
I feel like that maybe could have worked.
Yeah.
Not as well as Hopkins, but it could have been fun.
This is so oddly specific, but both Sean Connery and Gene Hackman, I think, lived well into their late 80s, early 90s. I think, I don't know why, but in my mind, they're both
Gene Hackman's
paired.
still alive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think about them as famous, nonagenarian, retired actors.
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So, some good genes there.
Yeah.
Hackman, Gene Hackman.
Ha. It's one good gene.
Yeah.
Oh my God, guys! We talk about sleepless cinematic. That was a sleepless moment right there. I totally Slept on that.
And I think this is like a pretty good segue into like, really the beginning of the content of the film. Yeah, and I think, I mean, this is not the first scene, but I think the point when the movie kicks into full gear is that first conversation between Clarice and Hannibal.
Yeah.
Where it's established that Clarice is this student at the FBI Academy who is, highly regarded by her superiors, and in spite of her lack of on-paper qualifications, is sent to interrogate this notorious serial killer with their hopes, veiled at first, of finding evidence that will help them to locate and imprison the notorious Buffalo Bill.
But she is not aware of this. This is Crawford's plan for her.
Yeah.
But she goes in under the guise of like essentially research. Like we're trying to learn from serial killers.
Mm-hmm. And if I remember correctly, in the beginning of the film, or one of the reasons why Jack Crawford is interested in using her is that he has a memory of her being somewhat of a firecracker in his class.
Yeah.
That she, I guess, took him to task on some opinion that he had. And so right away, there is this kind of exceptionalism about the Clarice Starling character. And unfortunately, it's something that the movie continues to contend with. I think it's one of the big themes of the film is how Clarice, a young woman who is ostensibly not as well decorated or well trained, has to machete her way through this jungle of law enforcement and FBI and doctors that are largely male.
Yeah, right? It sets this up pretty early on as well. And I mean, I really enjoyed, there's a shot of her getting into an elevator, and she's so small. I don't know how tall Jodie Foster is, but I'm going to guess she's like 5'1", maybe. Maybe this movie just shrinks her down a little bit because she's always next to men. There's this shot of her in an elevator where she's like in the middle at the front, and then there's like all these men who are a foot taller than her, just towering behind her.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which is a pretty symbolic image, I think, of what she contends with throughout the film. It's not just there. It's like there's that funeral scene later where it's just like, again, talking about close-ups. I think also the point of view angles in this film, I think, lend a lot to bringing that theme across and making it extremely apparent to the viewer that what we're supposed to feel is her discomfort.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's another one where she and her friend Ardelia, who seems to be one of the few other like women at the FBI Academy, are like jogging, and a group of men jogs past them and then sort of like glance back and check them out and grin.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So,
and I mean, Silence of the Lambs is frequently cited as a major advancement in feminist film. Even, as a movie from a male director.
And a male screenwriter.
Yeah.
Totally.
Based on a book by a man.
Exactly. And I mean, those point of view shots are, I think, one of the most frequently cited elements of that.
I listened to an interview with Jodie Foster. She did an interview at the BFI about 6-7 years ago. And she was actually, because she had a little bit of juice in her career when she did end up getting this role. She was not the first choice of Jonathan Demme, but she did... she was actually involved very early on in the development process of this film.
She read the book, right?
She read the book. She, I think, was lobbying pretty hard to pretty much anybody who was involved that she also wanted to be involved. But she had won an Oscar, I think, about 2 years or so before the project actually got off the ground in the movie The Accused. Have you guys seen that movie, by the way?
No. I haven't, but again, as you may get to in preparation for this conversation, I was reading that Demme, like, not particularly impressed with her performance in that movie.
Well, I think I will get to this in just a sec. Yeah. One of the things I think, we could say, we were talking about Silence of the Lambs being directed by a male director, written by a male screenwriter, based off of a book written by a male writer. But I think that Jodie Foster had a little bit of pull. I think by the time she was actually cast and they were actually filming this movie, I think she was able to impose a little bit of will on the film. And she did talk a little bit about this. I wrote a specific quote that she talked about when she was asked why she lobbied so hard to be in this film. And she said, quote, "I had played a lot of victims, a lot of women who had been acted upon and things had been done to them. That is a big part of women's history. It would be remiss to only play characters that are presidents or doctors. A large part of our history has been about being acted upon. And for me, the reason why it was so important to make this movie was that there was a sort of healing process, almost a growing up process, to finally play a woman who saves a woman. That woman who is saving the woman sees a reflection of herself in the woman that she's trying to save." And so I think that by this point, some of, I think, the sensitivities that this movie has, or that have kind of carried over into how the film has been perceived and its legacy, I think we can maybe argue that some of it comes through in her performance, and maybe just some of the juice that she had. She was able to impact, I think, a little bit of how, not just how her performance might come across, but also maybe in how it was edited and ultimately ended up in theaters.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with that, because I think that part of her passion for it comes through so palpably in the movie. And I think you can compare that to actresses that Demi originally wanted, who are turning this film down because of the content, who Michelle Pfeiffer and Meg Ryan are both women that he considered for this, who apparently Meg Ryan was slightly offended when approached about this. I think that that's the complete opposite of Jodie Foster, who is coming to this saying like, well, yes, this is gruesome material, but that's not all it is.
Right, right.
Yeah. And then, in thinking about like this symbolic imagery of Clarice's journey and, well, effectively Jodie Foster's too, I remember in that Sid Field reading that I was assigned in high school about The Silence of the Lambs, that there was one of the anecdotes from that really stuck with me, was that something about how the opening shot of a movie can tell you everything you need to know. And that the opening shot of The Silence of the Lambs, in a way, it kind of does that, because it's this hill on a training course at Quantico, and you just see initially Clarice at the bottom of the hill, and she makes it all the way up, running up that hill. Huh. Maybe Kate Bush could have gotten that boost way before Stranger Things.
Yeah, maybe.
If that song had been used in the movie. But yeah, and I remember just the first time watching the movie, I just thought Jodie Foster's performance just jumped right out of the screen. I could see why it had won an Oscar. Same thing with Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's like a real hero's journey of a film.
Yeah.
She starts definitely as something of a David, quote unquote, who kind of has to go up against Goliath, and Goliath takes many forms, Goliath is, the government. Goliath are, her direct bosses, I guess, are the people directly above her, and then also becomes Hannibal Lecter, so, but in some way she kind of gets something out of everybody by the end of it. And is rewarded for it.
And that, like, I remember reading in this Yvonne Tasker book as well, that there's a lot of analysis of the movie that points to this kind of paternalistic fulfillment that she seeks. And I mean, it's a debated aspect. It's not like everyone agrees about it, but that, she is responding to the loss of her father at a young age. And that, there are people who argue that in figures like Hannibal Lecter or Jack Crawford, that she sees somewhat of a father figure.
Perhaps, although I almost interpret this as she's trying to fill that role herself.
Yeah, and actually that was mentioned in the book too, that she's really trying to assume that level of authority in her own life. But it's, that can't happen without quite a few points of adversity along the way, among which are, of course, Hannibal Lecter's taunts.
One of the things that struck me this time watching The Silence of the Lambs was that it almost feels a little bit like a primer about how to engage with the idea of serial killers in the world.
Yeah.
Which I know, serial killers had been around for quite a while, but, I think in terms of them as sort of a presence in the media, I think maybe modern times might point to, you mentioned Ed Gein before, which is the late 50s. He is maybe the most direct reference to what happens for the Buffalo Bill character and some of his more disgusting criminal activities. But I think, if you kind of keep moving through the 60s and the 70s, you start seeing Ted Bundy, and you start seeing
the Manson murders.
The Manson murders, John Wayne Gacy.
Yeah.
And
Son of Sam.
Son of Sam, exactly. And so, there's this kind of simmer, I think, in the public that kind of slowly kind of starts to build a bit. And I think, by the late 80s and then by the early 90s, I think there's an understanding and a real fascination with the idea of serial killers. I also was thinking a little bit too, just looking at the 3 years that 1989, 1990, and 1991, there are 3 incidents about serial killers in the media that I think are very profound. The first of which was January 1989, that was when Ted Bundy was electrocuted and killed. And it's well documented that his murder there was this like public, almost like catharsis that happened. People were making T-shirts about this. People were lined up outside of the prison where he was being executed with signs and selling T-shirts. Like, it was a real event and kind of a strange sociological moment. And then in 1990, there's this movie called, have you guys seen Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer?
Not yet, no.
Okay. So that movie is wild. And still, I think on the level of something like Silence of the Lambs, holds up just from an aspect of shock and brutality. But that movie had been filmed about 4 years before, and it just was looking for a distributor for a long time. And finally in 1990, it came out, and it was a movie that was very polarizing. There were some people that absolutely hated it, but then it actually had some champions amongst critics. And so it was this movie that kind of slowly kind of hung around a little bit. And again, I mean, it is what the title suggests. It is a portrait of a serial killer. And so it shows all the kind of brutality of what this particular person does, but also tries to humanize him. And then this is the one I find really particularly interesting. So this movie that we're talking about, Silence of the Lambs, comes out February 14th of 1991, right? Do you guys know what happens in July of 1991?
Jeffrey Dahmer.
Exactly. Yeah. Jeffrey Dahmer, his whole thing, he gets apprehended, and he's discovered to have killed almost 20 men and have like dismembered and disfigured and even like tried to eat some of his victims, like in an attempt to like be with them. And the crime and all of its details, it's weird. It's like, it almost sort of feels, it makes watching the Silence of the Lambs almost feel like this sort of like safe and tidy way to experience the threat and danger, but also like the real dark fascination with something that was actually happening in real life.
Yeah.
And so I find it really interesting that this movie was released in February, and then between the time that it was actually awarded, and got this huge sweep, that there was a very well publicized incident with a serial killer that the whole nation, I think, was really gripped by. That this movie really, I think, shares a lot thematically with.
Yeah, no, that is very interesting. And what's part of, I think, the intrigue of the movie, like, I don't know if a character like Hannibal Lecter could exist in real life. Like, there is this aura of class to him that it's positioned in contrast to Buffalo Bill, who really is kind of this blue collar character. But Hannibal Lecter is this person who is like painting, or he's drawing pictures of cathedrals in Florence, and he's listening to Bach when he's in his temporary prison cell. And, class is just something that comes up a lot in The Silence of the Lambs, too. It's worked into the gender dynamics, among other things, of the movie. I mean, they're all inextricably connected.
Jodie Foster did mention in her interview that there was a push for him to be British because language was such a big part of how he manipulated people, and that there was something that would be particularly interesting, that would be a slight hook, an instant hook for the viewer to know that there was something different about how he spoke.
Yeah.
That was supposed to like be part of his not just appeal, but like part of his danger.
Yeah, and I think also visually, Hopkins really pushed for having a more fitted jumpsuit. And when asked, like, well, why? And the answer I think he gave was that Hannibal would have bribed somebody to get him a better fitted jumpsuit for prison. So
Like he wanted to be.
I think
I don't know,
he
like
just
look
wanted,
classier.
yeah,
or
he
like-
wanted to
yeah.
look more clean cut as
Gotcha.
opposed to just like in a, it's not like they're measuring you when you get checked into prison. Like you
Totally.
get whatever is on the rack that will stay on you.
Yeah.
And I think he wanted to look tailored.
I like that.
Interestingly, though,
Interesting,
I
yeah.
mean, like it's not often mentioned about Hannibal Lecter, but one area where the facade falls apart a bit, that comb over, you can still tell he's bald. I mean,
Yeah,
I mean, I think,
guess,
for what it's worth, I mean, he beats Donald Trump in that regard, but I mean, he does have a comb over, just saying.
Okay.
But they also, I don't think he probably has to do that with his hands. Like
Yeah.
they're not even giving him pencils. I don't think they'd give him a comb or a hairbrush.
Right.
So
Yeah,
he
nothing
just-
with points.
Exactly.
Yeah.
yeah, he would find a way to turn it into a lethal weapon.
Yeah. And since we're talking about Hannibal now, one thing I really want to unpack about him, it's a detail that's always interested me, and I'm sure many other viewers as well, is that for all of the malicious acts that he commits, that at that moment, as Clarice is leaving their first meeting and Miggs attacks her as she's on the way out, of all the things that Hannibal could do, that is the thing that makes him go, oh, hell no.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing that is just like that, like offends him down to his core. This, definitely offensive, but compared to what he could do, relatively innocuous act of malice that Miggs commits to Clarice is just to him like so unspeakably ugly in his own words.
You know what though? He should be thankful for it because that's what stops her from leaving him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
allows him to call her back and
Yeah.
set his terms.
Yeah, it's just like Hannibal Lecter is such an enigma of a character, and this is one of those things I really like still kind of struggle to place it within his own mind. Like, not in a bad way. It's not like a knock at the character. It's just like I'm trying to understand his psychology around that. That like, even if an act of murder is being committed, if it's done courteously, does that make it better?
I mean,
I don't think he necessarily, though, murders people in the most courteous way either. I do think that eating someone's tongue is pretty gruesome.
he's
yeah.
pretty brutal. I mean, we were talking earlier about the gore factor in this film. I think when it gets gory, I think it gets gory.
Oh, totally.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean that 2-second shot after Hannibal's made his escape, where you realize that he's wearing Pembry's face. Yeah,
Amazing.
It's so brief, but it's so effective.
Oh my god, that whole escape scene to me.
Yeah.
I was as riveted watching it now as I was, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That scene is chef's kiss right
Yeah.
now.
Absolutely.
So good.
But
Yeah.
I almost wonder if his level of restraint has to do with the person, that has to do with his victim or the victim of the circumstance. So like I don't think would have intent to murder Clarice even at the beginning of this film. He doesn't find her to be deserving of that ire.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the fact that she's attacked, like his issue with that, it's not that someone has been attacked in that way necessarily. It's that it's her.
Yeah, that he even though he's dressing her down throughout that whole first conversation, that he still feels some sympathy for her. Yeah, and that's what keeps him from doing it. Yeah,
A rube, right?
yeah.
So he calls her.
You know what you
A
look like to
hustling
me?
rube.
Yeah, yeah. This is not the last time that I'm going to quote Hannibal Lecter in this conversation.
I also love, this movie, the way they write him is really masterful. I love that detail where I don't remember what he says exactly, but it's something like, and you sometimes wear this cream, but not today.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that line is like incredible because it's so loaded.
Yeah.
It's like he's his sense of smell or whatever he's got cooking in there is so finely tuned that he knows that she uses it, but is not wearing it now. I mean, That's some true villainous shit right there.
Yeah. Apropos of that, yeah, I mean, this is established in a moment when he's smelling the air through the small holes in his the glass covering of his cell, where he's just picking up these details of Clarice through scent. Have either of you seen the movie from last year, Bones and All?
No.
So do you know the premise of the movie?
A little bit.
Tom Holland? No.
No, it's Timothy Chalamet.
Timothy Chalamet.
It's the Luca, whose name
Guadagnino.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, starring...
Mark Rylance is in it,
My
too.
partner
Yeah.
read this book recently, and I think didn't care for it. But
I thought it was a great movie, actually. But a detail that's established in that movie, which is about two young cannibals on the run and in love with each other, is that these cannibal characters all have a very strong sense of smell. And I don't know how true to reality that is, but it's said in Bones and All that cannibals, because they maybe having to do with being such a rare group of people, that they can smell each other from miles away.
I'm going to
Jeez.
assume that that's exaggerated,
Yeah.
but I am curious as to
Yeah.
if there is an amount of truth just to cannibals having, a more advanced sense of smell.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm willing to find that out.
makes you wonder, in the continuation of the plot of John Waters' Polyester, could Francine Fishpaw have been a cannibal?
Or is the strong sense of smell what turns you into a cannibal?
I mean, cannibalism is...
It's just so tempting. You smell the skin cream or whatever.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like smelling, a really delicious meal.
Cannibalism is touched upon in other John Waters movies that we have talked about.
Yeah. It seems like it would work backwards, though.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
I guess chronologically, Polyester happens after a film like Multiple Maniacs,
Yeah.
where,
Yeah.
the divine character actually, no, doesn't the divine character start eating someone's heart
Yeah.
in that film? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
There we go.
It's worth saying now that The Silence of the Lambs is a very fitting movie to transition out of our perceptions of sanity cycle with.
Absolutely. I was
Totally.
thinking
Yeah.
about that. This transition is.
I was going to
spot
say,
on.
yeah, we also recently had a conversation about all of these films, and I think there's a little bit of bleed over. So
Yeah.
hopefully we're not alienating somebody who has not listened to that episode.
Yeah.
But
yeah. And there's
anyway, you're absolutely right. This
Yeah.
movie is a very fitting transition out.
Oh yeah, totally. Because Hannibal Lecter is, he is officially deemed an insane character. I mean, I mentioned before I've read the book of The Silence of the Lambs, and among the many interesting details of it, one detail that I was really captivated by about the book is that it's written in the third person. And it never officially breaks that, but it does manage to find its way into the thoughts of several characters, namely Clarice, Hannibal, and Buffalo Bill. And these moments when you get a glimpse at Hannibal's inner monologue, this is not like a frenzied mind. Like, he is always so many steps ahead of everyone. He has a plan for everything. And even when he's just, kind of going through his process of committing gruesome acts, there is a very careful procedure to it. He is not... I said it before, it's not a frantic mind that he has.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, in rewatching the movie this time, the detail in how he gets the senator's daughter and kind of traps her. That is a detail that's based, I think, directly off of how Ted Bundy used to kidnap women.
Yeah.
Which is
the wounded deer
The
thing.
wounded, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, although
the arm and the sling and stuff.
Yeah, which it's like I watched this scene and my initial thought is that I would never do this. Like the thing that if I am alone walking to my apartment in the dark in the middle of the night and a man asks me to help load something into his car, I am legitimately
Hard
running.
pass.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen the movie, the original Vanishing?
No.
No.
Okay. I highly recommend that movie. It is extraordinarily disturbing, but it's another film that actually, oddly enough, is I think paired somewhat nicely with The Silence of the Lambs, because the way that The Silence of the Lambs, I think the to the point that you just made about flipping into some narration between the characters, that film is kind of neatly constructed, where the first 50 minutes or so of the film is told from a more omniscient viewpoint, where there's a couple and they are on a road trip and they get into an argument, And then they stop off at a rest stop, and suddenly she disappears. And the movie then cuts to following a specific character, and you don't quite understand why. But then about maybe 10 or 15 minutes into following this character, you completely understand why you're seeing them, which is that you're watching the kidnapper go from being a family man to being somebody who wants to try to commit the perfect crime. And so there's this kind of flip a little bit there. Also, I think a fascination with the idea of serial killers. That movie definitely plays into that. Fantastic film, super unnerving. Check out the original Vanishing, not the 1993 version with Jeff Bridges and Kiefer Sutherland.
Okay.
Nice. Thank you for the recommendation.
Of course.
Oh yeah, just actually kind of a funny side note about this is that, so a few weeks ago, like one of my roommates is like in the process of moving furniture and brought a hand truck into the apartment. And so, of course, you know, we all had to take turns trying to stand on it. And when I took my turn there, of course, I had to say, if you'll forgive the quote, "Tell me, Senator, did you nurse Catherine yourself?"
Oh my goodness. Wow. So like
Yeah.
a pretty big one, a pretty like sizable one.
You could, one that you could stand on.
Right. And one that you
Yeah.
could tilt back.
Yeah.
Okay. Were you guys taking turns like standing in it and holding one another?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
I have to say, like, it is precarious doing that without being strapped onto it. Yeah.
okay.
So it's like, I mean, Hannibal Lecter should consider himself pretty comfortable that he even got, you know, the strapping there to be attached to that thing.
Although you really have to be entirely confident that then the person holding it is going to keep you safe.
Yeah,
if you
sure.
are strapped onto it, because if you're going down, that is going to hurt.
Yeah, because I mean, you know, I wouldn't put it past Dr. Chilton to just drop him if he was mad at him.
Yeah.
And
Hannibal refers to his petty torments
Yeah.
early on,
Right.
and this seems maybe slightly above petty.
Yeah. But you know, maybe to make it a little pettier for Dr. Chilton to just go, "Oh, whoops."
Yeah. That would
he drops
definitely
it.
up the petty on
Yeah.
that for sure.
Yeah.
I think also the Dr. Chilton character, I think, is another one of the very first, very clear references to a man kind of being really unprofessional with Clarice.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
I think every man that she encounters, I think, hits on her to some capacity. And I think he is introduced fairly early on. And so we see that with him, because even though we've met Crawford and we've talked a little bit about how there's some amount of you know, tension between them in that way, but it seems to have been like maybe watered down slightly from the original intent. And so, yeah, I think Chilton is the first one that is, and you know, I forget exactly the quote, but he's essentially like, "Oh, how long are you in Baltimore?
Yeah,
like it can be
right.
a great town if you
got
have
the
somebody
right
to show you
guide or
around."
whatever. Yeah.
And it's even the minor characters. Like, I mean, this is part of how the movie is so good at flipping the male gaze. Is that, you know, you see like even these minor characters who hit on Clarice in like what feel like the dullest moments of the movie. They just still take that opportunity, like Pilcher at the Natural History Museum.
Yeah, the bug men.
Yeah. Which I want to say quickly about that character. Emilio, I don't know if this will land for you, but Madeline, I know this will land for you. I thought possible alternate casting. I could see Scott Thompson from Kids in the Hall having played Pilcher.
Totally.
Yeah. Just imagine Buddy Cole saying all that stuff to Clarice.
Absolutely.
It's like, "Oh, what do you do when you're not detecting Starling?"
Because there's also like this kind of, I mean, I think maybe he has a lazy eye, which I do as well, actually. So which now whenever I tell people, they like look for it. You won't be able to see it right now, I promise.
Yeah.
We definitely won't be able to see it.
So it's not a knock at him, but it does sort of add this like vacantness to his gaze at her.
Yeah.
Sure.
But in the moments after that awkward interaction, and he admits that he's hitting on Clarice, then his colleague, I forget his name at the moment, but he directs them back to actually studying the death's head moth right there. And, you know, that look on his face of like, oh, right, I'm supposed to be working.
Yeah.
I just feel like it captures that like really well, that awkward transition moment.
Also, at this point in my notes, I wrote, "I do not like bugs."
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is not a good movie for people who are bug phobes.
Just one last point about what was this character's name?
Pilcher.
Pilcher. Sorry.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, there was something very different about how he was hitting on her, though. And I think a little bit it's alluded to that there's something about how at least she's comfortable enough with him to be a little bit playful and to put it back on
She
him.
kind of flirts with him a little bit
But
in a playful way.
Yeah, but also in a way of being like, we have enough of a relationship. When she shows up to them, it's sort of alluded to. She's like, these are friends she knows that are willing to do her a favor. And so there's a little bit of like a back and forth. And there's also, I think, something disarming about him being like, yeah, I am hitting on you.
Yeah.
And that it's like, it feels different, but it also, I think it plays into a lot of what's going on throughout the film.
And there's not a power imbalance between them. He doesn't seem as much older than her than all of these other men that she's also paired with in other scenes.
Doesn't one of the guys say also like he doesn't have a PhD? Go listen to him or something?
Yeah.
I was also reminded slightly of, this is very specific, but 4 years later in the movie Seven, her entering the museum sort of reminded me a little bit of Morgan Freeman entering the library. And then I don't know, there's something about like the way it was shot where it's like you see her, them entering, I guess, I don't know, from up top, or there was some connection there where I saw it and immediately was getting flashbacks to Seven.
Yeah, I mean, it's like both being, like the respective scenes for each movie both being departures from the subject matter.
Exactly. And also doing a little bit of outside research.
Yeah.
Both of them kind of stepping like out of where you would normally expect to get hard answers for the particular crimes that they're investigating.
Yeah. Or at least aesthetically, these are departures, not thematically.
Sure.
But great connection. Relevant detail in the book, actually. And there's, a little bit of this in the last scene of the movie because you see that Pilcher and his partner are there at Clarice's graduation. I believe that Clarice and Pilcher become a couple in the book.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that it ends with them staying in a house together or something like that.
Ah.
Yeah, it's
good for them.
Yeah.
They seem cool.
Crazy kids.
Yeah, even if Pilcher's a little awkward, it's like, I feel so much better about him than most of the other men in this movie.
Sure.
Yeah. And actually, I mean, there's so many great details to talk about. One thing I want to discuss a little bit, we haven't talked much about Buffalo Bill yet.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about in like that first scene where he abducts Catherine Martin, that, like you don't even see his face at first. You just see his eyes. You don't even get a good close up of his face until like most of the movie has already happened. But that in that scene, like the way that Catherine Martin is portrayed struck me as kind of like aesthetically a reference to what the movie was kind of leaving behind. Like Catherine Martin, like I think my first thought when I see her on screen is like she could have gone to Ridgemont High. She's, like very much embodying an 80s aesthetic in my mind.
Sure.
And
she's singing along to American
Tom
Girl.
Petty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is a movie that is like pretty sparing in its needle drops, but when they do happen, they feel like, ooh, that's interesting.
Goodbye, horse.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. And that, I mean, this movie does, you mentioned Running Up That Hill, Stranger Things earlier, but like, I think this movie does for that song what Stranger Things does for Running Up That Hill. Like, I think Goodbye Horses really takes off after this movie in particular.
And that shot of Buffalo Bill looking at himself in the mirror, like if you were to quiz people, like what movie is this from, and get the shot that maybe might stump some people, I feel like that would be the one.
We were talking earlier about like when we first saw this film.
Yeah.
That scene where he does a little bit of tucking, that was actually the scene that I remember from having seen it in like disparate clips. Yeah. That was one of the more stronger details. I was like, somebody does that in a movie. That happens.
Yeah.
And I can't remember. It might have been like 12 or something when it.
Yeah. And the discourse around Buffalo Bill is something that is, it is abundant to say the least. And I mean, there are other, writings and podcasts that have unpacked this in more detail than we'll be able to today. But I mean, I feel like it's at least worth acknowledging that Buffalo Bill, for all the complexities of that character, is typically seen as someone, despite having been conflated with trans people in the real world, is someone who is widely understood, even within the movie's narrative, to not be trans, just to be this really sort of confused kind of misogynist.
He's also very self-hating. And I mean, I think I was going to say implication, but I think it's very explicit that he just wants to be like the exact opposite of himself in every way. And one of those ways in his mind, one of the many ways in his mind is the change of gender. But that is certainly not the only way that he tries to, I think, stray from his true self.
Yeah. And I actually, in listening to the Blank Check episode about the Silence of the Lambs and preparing for this, I mean, there's a lot of great commentary on this subject in that episode. from their,
Thanks, blank check.
Yeah, thank you, blank check. It's mostly from their guest, Emily St. James, who happens to be trans. And one of the quotes that she says in that episode, to effect, is that Buffalo Bill fails to understand that womanhood is not a costume, that it is a lived experience, and that he does not comprehend that.
Right.
Yeah,
And-
I mean, when we see, I think maybe it's the Goodbye Horses scene when he's putting the makeup on and he like continues to like, oh, do you want to fuck me? And it's like that again. It's like that's just an over sexualization of women as well.
And it's a very misogynist view because
Yeah.
it distills it down to just that.
Yeah, and
you
also
know, sexual attraction is somebody. Yeah, would you be compelled to procreate with this person or not?
Yeah, and also, I mean, that you can see Buffalo Bill's narcissism in that moment too, because of the question he's asking to himself. And also, like, this actually is a pretty interesting transition to an aspect of the movie that I don't think is often discussed. But when you look at all the set decorations in Buffalo Bill's basement, one thing that really struck me there that I haven't heard other people talk about is that there is a poster with a swastika on it down there.
Yeah, I caught that this time. I didn't pause to read what it said,
Right.
but I did clock the swastika, and I'm like, okay, so he's also a Nazi.
Yeah.
Or a Nazi sympathizer or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, I mean, and that the bigger topic that I wanted to get into from this that I don't think is discussed that often, I mean, I may be wrong about that, but the political coding of the movie, because I think that in some ways you can read The Silence of the Lambs as kind of an apolitical movie, but not completely. I mean, it's well known that its director and many of its stars are left-leaning people, and I think for its advances in feminism, that is certainly tends to align with left-leaning political sympathies as well. But within the movie, there's some interesting symbolism about politics. I mean, a good chunk of it is set in Washington, D.C. When you see Roger Corman's cameo as, I think, the FBI director, there's a picture of George H.W. Bush behind him, behind his desk. They're in both Hannibal Lecter's storage locker and in Buffalo Bill's basement. There are American flags on display.
Senator Martin is a junior senator from Tennessee.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that her political party is noted, but that's kind of it. There's not really much made of it beyond that. It's, it's as if to the viewer it's saying, forget her political biases. Her daughter is in trouble and needs to be saved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I think goes well into, the Jodie Foster's read on it, which is that this is... we're kind of stripping it down to just, somebody trying to save somebody else's life. You know what I thought a lot about when I was thinking about this? Ripley and Aliens.
Mm-hmm.
Same,
Totally.
really similar thrust.
Yeah.
Of just her being like, I got to go back for Newt.
Yeah.
And this is a really similar move there.
Yeah, I mean, when I watched this about 6 months ago, and I watched it with my partner, and he was like, yeah, I mean, I think Clarice Starling is like kind of my number one heroine of all time. And I was like, well, I think mine is Ripley, but I do think the two of them are neck and neck.
Those almost literally, because those two are 2 places apart on the AFI list of heroes and heroines. Like, I think Clarice is 6, Ripley is 8.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely final girl elements of like that last scene, that showdown with Buffalo Bill that Clarice has.
Oh gosh.
Man,
Yeah.
I just want to mention really quick, very clever the way they set up with all the cross-cutting.
Yeah.
Thinking that the police are actually descending on the home.
I
yeah.
think that's
Right?
my favorite moment of the whole film is, when you see, him in his basement and he's, talking with Catherine Martin, and then you see, Crawford and the rest of the FBI on the outside of a house. And we think that he's about to catch Buffalo Bill.
Oh, yeah.
We hear the doorbell ringing. And then when he answers the door, it's Clarice. It's so clever.
Very clever. And I'm going to say one other thing, which I don't know if any of you guys remember. You guys remember in The Fugitive? There's a moment where the police bust into the house of the other inmate that escaped from the bus accident.
Yeah.
They
Believe
set
so.
this up in an extremely similar way.
Totally.
Where right before they get a phone call saying, oh, she picked him up on the side of the road, which is exactly what happens to Richard Kimball. And so when they descend on the house, you actually for a moment think that the police have found him, but instead they found the other guy. And I have to imagine that was a little bit of a callback to this scene.
Totally.
Because I do think that bait and switch, I think, is one of the big standouts in this film. I think it was very influential when people watch it to be like, whoa, that was very well done. And Fugitive, just 2 years later, does a very similar move, and I think very effectively too.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, one of many examples of the influence that this movie kind of releases into the film world. But yeah, that parallel action sequence, I think it's often considered one of the great moments of parallel action in all film.
Yeah, and I mean, quickly, I feel like you get a couple of moments similar to that earlier on in the film, not to the same extent necessarily, but a couple of times where like present day and her flashback kind of blur together, and you get kind of the back and forth shots. Like, for example, when she's in the funeral home.
Walking towards the car.
Exactly. Yeah. Walking towards the car is another example where it's like shooting to her seeing her father coming home, but then it still shoots back to her in the present day at first, and it goes back and forth a bit before fully landing in the flashback.
Yeah. Actually, in that Sid Field reading from high school, I remember that another prominent note of that was mentioning that flashback is a tool that directors would best be advised to use sparingly, or directors and screenwriters. And I mean, citing how The Silence of the Lambs shows you just as much as you need to know in flashback, and it doesn't overdo it either.
Yeah, both of the flashbacks are very short as well.
Yeah. I think I've mentioned the film Belle de Jour on this podcast a couple times.
Yeah.
Buñuel. He does a very similar move in that film. 2 flashbacks, very short. You almost don't even realize they happen, but they convey a lot about the character's kind of inner turmoil.
Yeah.
In a really similar fashion to this film.
And ever since I read that Sid Field note about it, I have always been very attuned to flashbacks in films. Less is more with them, typically.
Sure.
And so we are getting to the point where we'll probably want to start drawing our conversation to a close, but there's a couple points that I know I have to cover before we wrap this up. And one question I still have, years later after having seen the movie multiple times, I still cannot quite figure out, how does Hannibal get a hold of Chilton's pen? It still vexes me.
You know what?
Yeah.
I agree.
I feel like we're not meant to know.
Yep.
Certainly, but I imagine it's
very curious. Yeah.
At some moment, as they are transferring him from that initial hand truck to the straitjacket, he just manages to sneakily grab it. And
I mean, maybe he's a sleight of hand expert.
He must be.
And it's just never, it's never referenced because it's not really necessary. But yeah, you would think that they have all these guidelines in place. They've had this guy in this facility for 7 years? Mm-hmm. So you would think that they would know not to carry around pens.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, absolutely.
But Chilton's pride gets in the way.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, though, that, omitting that, I think almost elevates Hannibal's, like his villainousness even more so, like his kind of supervillain status, that like, you don't even have to see it. You just know that it happened.
When you suddenly see the piece of that pen and you're like, oh shit.
Yep, exactly.
And
it's going down.
The shot from inside his cell in Memphis, when, briefly I should say, Tak Fujimoto's cinematography in this movie is so good.
Tak Fujimoto. I love him so much. He also did Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which still looks incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
But like that shot.
Very different film.
From inside the cell where the security guards are coming to deliver Hannibal his dinner, lamb chops, notably.
Mm-hmm.
And, just the camera dollies in and you see the piece of the pen in his hand before he bundles his hand into a fist, and the rest of it all proceeds. I love that one shot alone. I also love the shot in, the elevator when they first see the trickle of blood coming down.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. That tilt upward.
That whole scene to me is like a master class in how to do that. And the other thing I love is that when the body comes down, you don't even see...
You don't see the face.
You don't see the face.
You just see a little bit of like wound there.
But only if you're looking for it. I think only if you know to look to do that.
And they cut right before people can scream.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, Yeah, I could go on and on about how great that scene is. There two little last details. One that's a jumping off point of that. I've mentioned, I think, a little bit before, maybe in bonus content, I don't know. Soft spot film for me, The Mask of Zorro.
Mm-hmm.
The Anthony Hopkins character in that film. Have you guys seen that movie?
Part of it on TV many years ago.
Yeah.
But I can't really remember it.
Similar for me.
The Anthony Hopkins character in that movie pulls not exactly the same trick because he doesn't remove somebody's face, but he does that same trick of impersonating somebody who is either wounded or dead in order to escape from a prison.
Oh.
He does it again in that movie
wow.
to great effect, and it's actually pretty fun. And I have to imagine that there's a little bit of reflexivity in that. Another reason why I love that movie. It's just so good.
You know, the first time I ever saw The Silence of the Lambs, there was an honest moment when, you know, and you realize Hannibal, you know, with the face of Pembry on him, is sitting in that ambulance at the moment when he comes to and starts taking all the mask and everything off of him. There was a moment where I honestly thought, holy shit, is this supernatural now?
Oh,
did he possess this guy or something?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh no, he's wearing his face. Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, but even a scene before, after he hit sort of the showdown, but when the SWAT team bursts into the room where he was being held, and the one police officer,
Is it Pembry?
Boyle.
Boyle,
and Boyle is just strung up, and my thought is wow, he did that so fast.
Yeah, me too. That's another one. You said about the pen. I'm like, how did you do that so fast?
He worked that so fast, and then has to skin the guy's face off and change his clothes.
Yeah. The detail I saw this time that is you have that aerial view after he's already beaten the guy who's going to get strung up is he grabs the little switchblade and just slowly starts to walk out of the which I don't remember seeing before.
I know what he's going to do.
And this time I was like, oh, okay, this is the little detail that allows you to connect everything. I think that's one of the things I love about that scene is the little details that can help you connect from one scene to the next. It's just, it's awesome.
Speaking of which, I mean, it's worth noting very early in the film, it's easy to miss this if you're not thinking about it. But when Clarice is after her first meeting with Hannibal, she's looking at those microfilm copies of news stories about him. She has a pen in her mouth there.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It's this movie is so full of visual cues. I really notice something new every time I watch. I've seen this movie at least 4 times now.
You were talking about individual moments or scenes or just clips that really jump out to you. I'd love to know if you have one too, but I'm going to share one right now that I saw and just immediately was like, oh man, this movie is so good.
Yeah.
Is the first time that Hannibal Lecter meets Clarice and he asks to see her ID. Again,
Closer, please.
Yeah, exactly. That there is, there's one of these famous Jonathan Demme close-ups. But I love it because when you see Hannibal Lecter's face, he's looking straight into the camera for a few seconds and then suddenly looks down. And so you know that he wasn't looking at the beginning of that scene at the ID. He was looking at her and then looks down.
Yeah.
I love that detail. It's so good. It's so subtle. Oh man, it's just great.
And it's I think in many ways, in large part due to the close-ups, that this movie really is a commentary on viewership. That, those close-ups literally, they put you into the worlds of the characters in ways that, you cannot ignore. Even if you're a passive viewer, you're just kind of oh, okay, I'm here now.
To your question, Emilio, I think for me, I like the kind of very small moment that sticks out to me is when sort of around the same time, right before he escapes, when she, right after she discloses, her past with the lambs and everything. So, and he is like, oh, Clarice, your file. And then she goes to grab it and their fingers graze.
Oh, yeah.
It's so eerie. It's I can feel it when I watch it. Oh God,
yeah, definitely
it's magnificent, but
you're right.
So eerie.
You're right. I forgot about that, but you're right.
So incredibly effective. Yeah.
Clarice Starling's character actually survives his physical touch.
Exactly.
She's the only character in that movie that really does,
and probably the only character. Period. In his life since the time he started killing.
As we're drawing things to a close, before we get to unlikely shared universe, just want to ask, are either of you aware of a YouTube channel called the Walk of Life Project?
No.
So this is a YouTube channel that my cousin Sylvie hipped me to a few years back, which is built on the premise that, if not all, many movie endings can be perfectly synchronized with the Dire Straits song Walk of Life. And the video that they have the video that they have for The Silence of the Lambs is hysterical. It works so well.
I'm going to be checking this out later.
As Hannibal Lecter is putting that Panama hat on, and it's just da 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 da.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh,
for
good.
listeners too, check this out. They have a bunch of endings. They have a great Jurassic Park one too.
I was the Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
I was gonna say. I feel
They have
like I
The
might
Matrix.
know that one. I might know that one.
They have it for the Matrix too. They have it for a bunch of things. It works so well. Well, should we do unlikely shared universe now?
Sure.
Oh, let's do it.
Yeah. Do you want to go first, Madeline?
Sure, I'll go first. I mean, I legitimately, when preparing this, could not remember if we had done this one before, because I do have a connection with a film that we've talked about. And so I'm just going to set up the possibility that, Bill clearly is not well. And so I just think that there is a possibility where he gets apprehended and he pleads insanity. And perhaps at this point, they need to send him away. He is not safe to be around. He cannot be kept in a typical institution. And so perhaps he is sent away to a particular island, maybe a Shutter Island. And so my question, for those of us who have seen Shutter Island, we may recognize a character on that island called the Warden, but do we really know confidently that he is not also an inmate?
It's very possible that he got roped into the scheme.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What do you know?
So, and
That could be
maybe,
something.
maybe that was good old Jamie Gum.
Or a little time travel happening there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, what I can offer for unlikely shared universe is the possibility that, so perhaps after Hannibal Lecter's escape, that Barney, who is among the staff at the Baltimore institution where Hannibal is formerly imprisoned, Barney feels kind of, and Barney, by the way, is one of the, what would you call him, like the cell keeper?
Yeah, or like he's not an orderly. He's like a step above.
Yeah, he monitors the cell block that Hannibal is a part of.
I actually really like him. I love
He's
that scene where he
great.
goes, "You'll do just fine."
Yeah.
Yeah. He is
yeah.
one of the few men she encounters that's just kind to her
Yeah.
and
Nice.
not creepy.
Yeah, not even flirtatious.
Shout out to Barney.
Yeah, shout out to Barney. So let's say he feels, he feels a little bit responsible after Hannibal's escape. He feels some guilt, maybe not enough guilt to completely abandon his talents. So he exits that asylum, but he makes a move to the Baltimore Police Department. And oh, by the way, Barney's not his real name. It's just a nickname. His real name is Erwin Burrell. And he eventually finds that he's so good at this job that he just climbs the ladder, and before he knows it, he's the commissioner of the Baltimore Police Department.
Oh.
Do either of you know this reference?
I think I know where you're going,
Yeah.
but I'm not gonna say it. You can say it.
It's The Wire.
I was just gonna say Baltimore Police Wire. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
gotta be it.
Frankie Faison plays Commissioner Erwin Burrell in The
Gotcha.
Wire. And now the other unlikely shared universe possibility that I'll share is that, so at Hannibal Lecter's escape in Memphis, that the leader of the SWAT team there, who we never learned his name, by the way, but let's say that his real name is Chester Desmond. And he decides after that whole shebang that he's like kind of traumatized by this all, but similarly to Barney, he's not, lacking his talents enough to completely abandon the job. So he decides to become, he moves to the FBI and he becomes a detective there, or whatever the equivalent term would be.
Special agent.
Special agent. He becomes an FBI special agent. And then one of his assignments is to be sent up to this remote town in Washington state where a woman named Teresa Banks has been mysteriously murdered. And, I mean, sadly, this career move doesn't turn out to be a very good one for Chester Desmond. and precedes a similar killing about a year later of a girl named Laura Palmer.
Yeah, perhaps another special agent named Dale Cooper kind of picks up this trail a couple years later. I knew you were going to do this one, and I had this thought, and I was like, I could take time to put this together, or I could rely on the confidence that Julian is going to already do this one, and that's fine. And I just have to say, I know we need to end, but I just have to say that when Chris Isaak steps out of the SWAT vehicle, immediately I'm like, that man is so distractingly handsome. Like,
I love Chris Isaak.
To the point that I think the first time I watched it and not immediately recognizing who it is, I was like, who is that?
I love Chris Isaak. Chris Isaak, my dad listened to a lot of Chris Isaak when I was growing up. And so, that's how I know him. I just know him as the guy, somebody's crying.
Yeah. Just to check, Emilio, do you know what we were referring to?
Yes, you're talking about Twin Peaks, right?
Yeah.
More specifically, Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me.
Right, the more recent one.
Or not
no,
more
this
recent,
is
it's the movie.
The movie. I'm sorry.
The movie
yes.
that's a prequel, which
that's
Chris
what I
Isaak
meant.
is
But
in.
it was like
It was
more recent than the film, than the television series.
But it came out very shortly after.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Well, I do wish we could chat longer.
Yes.
But I mean, I actually haven't had my dinner yet, so.
Oh, okay. It's about time.
Yeah.
Just make sure you don't have a friend for it.
Well, I might eat in the company of friends. You got to be careful how you phrase that.
Sure, of course. Should we just preview really quick what we're doing next?
Yeah.
So next time we come together in this unique Best Picture winners cycle, we are going to discuss for our mise en scene category, a movie we are all yet to see as of this moment, one of the more recent winners of the trophy, 2021's Coda.
Yeah, which I think is a little bit interesting because us all being musicians, this is a music-based film.
Yeah, so this is a film that none of us have seen that I think we're, really interested. I think this kind of came out of left field, was more of an not anticipated win. And I think we'll get into that a little bit next week.
Sounds good.
We certainly will.
And on that note, guys, this has been a lot of fun.
As
it
always.
certainly has. You fly away back to school now, little starling.
You bet.